and welcome to the Sunday session. Today we have Rob Heatherington from WA, Russell Young from the Darling Downs near Dalby, and Kevin Elmy from, I'm not sure whether he's in Alberta or Saskatchewan. He moves around a little bit. Western Canada anyway. So welcome everybody. Welcome to the members. Okay, so today we're talking about the principle of ground cover.
But as soon as we start balancing our soil, building our fungal to bacteria ratio in the soil, now we're developing an ecological system that is favoring our cash crop. And the really easy way to see what we're farming for is having a refractometer and checking the Brix level of our plants. And once we get over a reading of 12, our bugs and our disease and our weeds start disappearing. And we've seen that in Western Canada over and over again, where we've been managing for our crop instead of managing for weeds. So the more tillage we do, the more synthetics we use, the more herbicides, the more fungicides, we're going to end up with more and more weeds. And if you don't believe it, we've been farming for a long time, and the weeds, when we first started farming, when they started showing up, and we got rid of them over 50, 75, 100 years, whether it's tillage or herbicides. No, because nature doesn't want bare soil. So with low Brix, with low vigor of our plants, and we keep trying to keep these plants alive, what's happening is, we just keep perpetuating these weeds, and they keep on coming because we are developing a system for the weeds, not our cash crop. And so, doing this Italian ryegrass and Persian clover underneath the barley crop, we know with those plants, they're a vegetative stage, so those roots are continuing to grow. As they grow, we're building mycorrhizae, we're getting root exudates, we're building the system. Whereas if you drive across Western Canada or the States or Eastern Canada or Australia, or when harvest is done, the best management practice is to keep it clean because we don't want to steal moisture from that next crop. So my buddy down at Indiana, Jimmy Evans, great guy. We should get him on too one of these days. One of the things he's done is he was seeding his irrigation pivot. He took his cash crop off, was seeding his cover crop, and he ran out with about a quarter of a hectare left. And he works with 2 soil scientists that monitor his soils. So he came out right before freeze up, and they went out to the field. And the 2 soil scientists went to this spot where it's black. There was nothing growing. They punched down 30 centimeters, and they just did a quick test of the moisture. And what they found was where there was nothing growing, in the top 30 centimeters, there was more moisture, about twice the moisture of where the cover crop was. And Jimmy said, okay, that's nice, but, these roots are going down about just over a meter. You got your punch truck, let's go down a meter and test. So they punched where there was nothing growing. They punched where the cover crop was. Where the cover crop was ended up having twice the moisture where like nothing growing. So where there was nothing growing, there was more moisture in the top 30 centimeters. But where there was cover crop growing, when the nighttime temperatures start dropping, the air starts cooling down, but the leaves cool down quicker. So now the moisture will condense on that leaf. That leaf will then be able to either absorb that moisture or have it ball up and fall onto the soil. When it falls on the soil, it will then follow the roots down deeper into the soil profile. If the plant absorbs it through the leaf, what it's going to do is it's still photosynthesizing, so it's going to release that as a root exudate, which is moisture deep into the soil. So if we can have moisture stored down at a meter as compared to only having it in the top 30 centimeters, that's going to help with our drought resilience. So I hear what you're saying about the drying out the soil. It's absolutely true if we don't have these deep tap roots. And this is where having, chicory is half the size of plantain, but I love its taproot. And so if we can go in and have, 1 plant per square meter of chicory in our paddocks, and we're going to have, these plants going to flowering and potentially going to seed. But if we could have that 1 per square meter, really low density, it does amazing things to storing water. In Western Canada, for the organic producers, we go with lucerne. And once again, 1 to 2 per square meter. Not huge numbers, just a little bit of lucerne in there so we can have that taproot going down, so we can have the mycorrhizae, we can have the end fixation. I'm talking to a lady in South Carolina, and she was talking about sandfoin. It's a species that is just, starting to get talked about in Australia. I love sandfoin. A little bigger seed, nice pink flower, so a little more diversity, so it makes the neighbors really talk and ask what you're doing. But it's an end fixer. It has a really deep taproot. It tolerates lower pH soils. It once again checks off a lot of boxes, and it's really easy to manage. Plus, it's anti-bloat, and hangs on to the leaves longer than what lucerne does when it gets hotter and drier. So, check.
Yeah, I've never grown lucerne or alfalfa, as you guys call it. So what you're saying is that it's the actual density of plants. So if you've got like one lucerne plant per square meter versus, I don't know, 10 or something like that, because that's got a really deep taproot or really deep root system, it's going to, use a lot more moisture there. So what you're saying is it's actually about the exudates from the sugars from the roots actually putting the moisture back in the soil, rather than actually the plants actually looking after itself for each one to get a certain amount of water for each plant
at low densities. If we go in, so for lucerne, I would be looking at about 200 plants per square meter versus 1. So 200 plants per square meter is going to use way more water and dry out the soil quicker than 1. So it isn't about the density; it's more about the diversity. So if we have a little bit of a taproot, and if you don't like lucerne, what else can we use that grows maybe shorter, still has a nice deep taproot? In England, they use a lot of comfrey. So playing around a little bit with that. When Haggerty's over here, I showed them some yellow blossom sweet clover, which is something that they use a lot in the very arid parts of Western Canada. There's a lot of times where in the growing season, we'll go through with 30 millimeters of moisture in the whole growing season, and yet the sweet clover, year in, year out, keeps providing feed.
There's something like safflower. I mean, that's got a deep taproot. That's a pretty incredible plant. What that'll do.
I love safflower. And now they have some spineless safflower, so this way they don't have that little poiky thing on the end of the leaf, so that when you're walking through it, you rip up either your legs, or if the animals try eating it, it gets away from some of those issues. Yeah, there's a bunch of great species out there that could be using, once again, low density and helping develop this system for our operations. And it may be where with technology, maybe we have a permanent strip of perennials within our field, and we can either seed between them or manage between them.
Is there a way that you can prevent the ground cover from going to seed before you harvest, or it doesn't matter because it's lower?
And so this is where, once again, philosophically, people will start getting a little too rigid in my mind. And so, when the zero-till people say, "Oh, I'm zero-till, and I will not till any of my soil." Well, if it turns out that the cover crop is getting a little too aggressive, maybe we go in with a narrow opener if we have a shank, and we knock that back. Do we go in with some herbicide? That is going to then allow that cover crop to get knocked back? Or do we look for species that, I'm thinking about our conference that's coming up. So I'm going through and, okay, so if we can have a plant that grows and if we can have something green through November, December into January, and then it just runs out of steam and dies, now we don't have to worry about terminate. We don't have to worry about it going to seed. We don't have to. So it is picking around with some of those things. But on the flip side, with the subterranean clover, the Persian clovers, the crimson clover, you guys have that full season that they will produce seed, reseed themselves out. And so this is where, okay, so do we manage it with tillage? Do we manage it with haying? Do we manage it with grazing? How do we manage it so it doesn't go too far? But the nice thing with legumes, Legumes have the advantages when we have low nitrogen available to those plants. When we have lots of legumes in our system, and this is the great thing of these lupins that are going wild and volunteering and fixing all of this nitrogen in the soil. There was a lady up at Geraldton. She was saying about these. She went into this one area, and these lupins were just rank. They were waist high. They were just out of control. So she went in. She slashed them. I can't remember if she rototilled them in or not, but she said the next year was it pigweed just went crazy. And I said, well, it's a nitrogen scavenger weed, and it's being triggered by all of those lupins that you worked into the ground. You didn't have anything growing, so the biology broke it down, triggered, nature produced a plant that is a nitrogen scavenger. Bang, that's the reason why your weeds are growing. So if we would have seeded more lupins into it or lucerne or some legume, it wouldn't have done well. The weeds would have taken it over because we had too much nitrogen. They lost the ecological advantage. If we would have seeded canola in there, if we would have seeded beets, potatoes, some of these nutrient scavengers, it would have been absolutely a lovely crop. So nature will balance itself out.
So maybe there's a place for measuring the carbon nitrogen ratio so we can determine what we're going to actually plant next then.
Absolutely. And do you have to measure it, or do we look at this field, this paddock here, where you have the radishes and you have some grasses in there? What's thriving? And so in order to grow a radish that size, when I was working with Steve Groff, he started up Cover Crop Solutions, and he developed the tillage radish. So he has a chart to tell us how many pounds or kilos of nitrogen that it takes to grow a radish that size. So I get a pretty good idea of where we are seed-to-N ratio by looking at what's there and what's thriving from that last crop, especially if it's multi-species. So that if we have a multi-species and those legumes are thriving, that tells me the nitrogen's low. If the brassicas are doing really well, that tells me your nitrogen levels are really high. If the grasses are the best of the bunch, okay, we have enough nitrogen, we have enough nitrogen supply in the system that the legumes are doing what they do. They're just getting enough nitrogen over to the grasses, but not to the excessive so that the brassicas start going crazy on it. But absolutely, the when I'm looking at ratios, I'm looking at your carbon nitrogen ratio in your soil and the residue, and I'm looking at your fungal bacteria ratio. And that's by you telling me what weeds are growing.
So Rob, the photo we're looking at here, did you terminate this ryegrass or did it die on its own?
No, that's just what come out the back of the header, that's all. So yeah. I'll just put that up there for ground cover. If you could go back to that one with the radish, please. The one we just looked at, we're talking about. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that was crimped, obviously. That's on a really sandy soil with a CEC of 3. So I was quite surprised how well that radish grew. It had no legumes in it. I do put legumes in with the radish now. But amazingly enough, the following wheat crop, that was doing 4 tonne in those areas there, with 19 units of nitrogen, and it's quite astounding, and it was so even, and it was the best germination I ever had. And so I've been told that when you grow brassicas, like with tillage radish and canola, that there's a hormone, tryptophan, and that converts to indole acetic acid. So that's why things do so well, like even after canola, it's a brassica. And so tillage radish, we're finding that the more we put tillage radish in the operation, we get less and less weeds, especially broadleaf weeds. The wild radish is disappearing, so it's pretty exciting, really. So it's all about picking your plants.
Absolutely.
So Rob, are you finding that your weed component is not an issue anymore, or less of an issue?
Well, in that particular paddock there, I struggled to find any broadleaf weed to spray like in the crop. I mean, my son still did it anyway. I wouldn't have done it. But the thing about it was that any of the broadleaf weeds that were in there, and like even the tillage radish, there was a few that obviously had come through. I don't know whether it was just a carryover seed from the year before or whatever it was. But I checked the Brix levels of them, and they're only 3. And they're crawling with red mite, so they wouldn't have done anything anyway, and they weren't doing anything anyway. They were just there, but they weren't really competing. They weren't going to grow taller than a wheat crop. So sometimes they get a little bit carried away about trying to have a billboard table like in a crop to keep it nice and clean. You just have to actually go out and look at the actual situation and see how the weeds are doing, and because that's how it's supposed to be. You fertilize, well, you set it up so you actually thrive on certain conditions, whereas the weeds, you set it up so that the situation's not as good for them, so the insects go to the weeds and not to the crop. So that's how it's supposed to be. I thought it was pretty exciting, really.